and a Q&A session. So before we get started, just to let you know, as at now, I'm not looking at the chat box, but I'll get there if there's anything that needs my attention there. Okay, I will just try to show my face 1 more minute. Hello. So I speak with the face behind the camera. Uh, where was I? So I was talking about these three presentations. Will be followed by a panel discussion and a Q&A session. So before I get started, I would just like to mention some few guidelines that will be guiding us. Please, as your questions come to you, write them up in the comment section or in the chat box, pardon. Write them up in the chat box, and we'll be directing them to the panelists or to the speakers at the end of their presentations. Please use the chat box, and if you have any troubles with hearing or listening to us, could you kindly double check first at your end, maybe sign off and sign in again, and then you try to check your devices and the systems to see that it's okay at your end. If not, you could kindly reach out to us, and we'll endeavor to do our best to sort that out with you. So without much further ado, I would like to present or welcome our first speaker, to me, who will speak to us about innovative challenges within this topic. Hello, to me. Over to you.
Thank you, Falone. Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, to me, we can.
Okay, thank you so much for this opportunity. It's a real pleasure to be joining this conversation, and I'm quite excited at the opportunity to share some of our work from the Ready side, as already introduced, and thank you for that great introduction. My name is Dumiko Manyani, and I work at Frontline AIDS as the programs lead for the adolescents and youth portfolio. And I have the privilege of managing a big program that is now famously known as Ready. And through Ready, we reach thousands of adolescents and young people in their diversity. A large part of the work that we do centers around building capacity of young people to access health services, and to do it from a point of youth-friendly service delivery and in ways that speaks to what they would like to see. I have a presentation prepared, and I'm just going to try and quickly load it up so you can see it. Please let me know as soon as it comes up on your screen. Is it there? Okay. Is it in presentation mode?
Not yet.
Okay, let's do this. Okay. All right. So I will be speaking to innovative approaches to promoting youth bodily autonomy and best practice on community-based interventions for youth. As I've already said, and then that's a slide of my fabulous panel along with me. As I've already mentioned, one of the programs, or rather the overall program portfolio where I work, is referred to as Ready. And Ready has become synonymous with ethical and meaningful engagement of young people. It has also become synonymous with vibrance, because it's really important that in all the work that we do, young people inform programming, participate in evaluation of the programming, and thus help us to co-create programs that reach young people in ways that are meaningful to them. At the heart of the Ready project, which I'll be speaking to, is a youth-centered implementation model which recognizes young people's resilience, agency, to not only implement the work that affects them, but to influence other young people as well. So our work is premised on a peer model approach that first targets young people who have already built resilience, are empowered, and are in a position to receive training and to then support other young people. When we got this invitation, one of the things that really jumped at me was the focus on bodily autonomy. As luck would have it, our program actually centers on bodily autonomy. So our goal is that adolescents and young people living with or most affected by HIV, especially those that are vulnerable, should become resilient, empowered, and knowledgeable, and have bodily autonomy and the freedom and agency to realize their sexual reproductive health and rights. So Ready Plus is a program that is premised on rights language, because you cannot talk about bodily autonomy without foregrounding the rights agenda. It is a program that adopts a socio-ecological model. It not only focuses on young people at the core, but it recognizes that for the essence of bodily autonomy and other rights framework to happen, communities where these young people live need to be supported, need to have their capacity built, and need to have the norms change in order to accept young people's choice. It's a model that also recognizes that health facilities where young people access, for example, health services, SRH commodities, and so forth, also need to be purpose-made to become youth-friendly, that health workers need to be trained to be able to support and deliver services that are appropriate to young people, as well as choice around bodily autonomy. Another level of this model is around working with decision makers. And this is not only about young people getting a chance to advocate and lobby for their own rights, but it's also around recognition of movement building. We're currently in an era where Africa in particular is facing quite a lot of backlash on the rights language. We're seeing regression in laws and policies around LGBTI issues, for example, and we're also seeing traction around CSE work, where increasingly there's a denial of ensuring that young people are accessing appropriate comprehensive sexuality education. And therefore, Ready, my apologies, there's a little bit of a background noise. Please let me know if it's disturbing you. But I was saying that under Ready, it's not just about policy and advocacy. It's also about recognizing that youth voices can be amplified through movement building and through shared and co-created events like the upcoming SRHR Symposium in August. And most importantly, that young people have the agency and the ability to design programs that respond the best to issues around bodily autonomy. Finally, the model recognizes that a big part of rights, access to health, and realizing bodily autonomy comes hand in hand with young people, economic empowerment, and livelihood opportunities. We know from various research that a big part that impacts on bodily autonomy often has to do with issues of poverty, disenfranchisement, and disempowerment. So the last layer of the Ready Plus model recognizes this and seeks to build economic empowerment of young people to enable them to make choices that support their bodily autonomy. I'll go quickly to the next slide. I've already spoken, I think in summary around the next couple of slides, but the next 3 slides show you the different delineations around bodily autonomy and the innovation that Ready Plus brings in this conversation. As I've already alluded to, at the center of our framework is the young person and how the young person relates to other young people. And in thinking about bodily autonomy, and particularly because quite a lot of our young people are young people living with HIV, we recognize that bodily autonomy is not just about prevention. is also around enabling young people in their diversity to access services, commodities, and anything else that influences how they want to practice bodily autonomy. Let me give an example with young people who are currently on treatment. A lot of the time, we tend to see young people who are living with HIV as a sum of them just getting treatment to HIV. However, through Ready, we also recognize that young people are not defined by their HIV status, but in actual fact, young people are as broad as the next person that we could be thinking about from a programming perspective. So we look at issues around U equals U. For instance, we know that when young people adhere to treatment, it also makes it easier for them to become, proponents of HIV prevention. Because once somebody has adhered to treatment, they will therefore reduce the chances of transmitting HIV. However, this is not the end of it. Family planning, enjoyment of sex and sexual activity by the same young people is critical. And therefore, conversations around access to family planning choices, access to information and education around such choices is critical. And it also underscores young people's sexuality, which is another principle around bodily autonomy. Like with everything else, bodily autonomy is not just about accessing services. It's also around ensuring that communities have the correct information, that it is updated on a regular basis, and that it is youth-friendly. Therefore, communication, information needs to always respond to changing trends. And most importantly, it needs to be designed in a way that reaches the youth or the young people across board. And another critical element around the program is around creating safe spaces. We know the backlash when it comes to the rights agenda. And so under Ready, it's important that young people are supported with safe spaces. These can be virtual, these can be physical, but at the core of this work is to ensure that young people have the space and the audience and the financial support to inform programming around bodily autonomy, to be able to make choices around commodities that speak best to their needs, and most importantly, are a strong voice in platforms where young people need to advocate for bodily autonomy. I also touched around safe and supportive communities. We know that one of the biggest challenges is around social norms, community norms, and gender norms where young people exist. And so through Ready, we recognize a need to ensure that parents, caregivers, community leaders are capacitated to understand, firstly, the importance of bodily autonomy. Secondly, the framing of rights and the rights language. And thirdly, the capacity to speak on these issues and thus be able to support the young people in their communities and in their families. And we do this work through training, providing support to caregivers to understand these issues and to also understand how to support the young people under their care the best. We provide psychosocial support as a means to ensure that young people are supported with resilience building, that the families where they come from understand the same, and that the communities where these young people are as well are able to articulate the rights framing in a way that uplifts and empowers young people. Then I spoke a little bit about improving services, particularly within the health structure. And one of the important elements here is that often when we think about bodily autonomy and access to health, and particularly SRH, we sometimes forget that the health providers themselves require training. And they require training that is robust, that rises and lends itself to the needs of young people, that recognizes young people's needs, and that young people are diverse. And so part of Ready Plus, the model builds capacity of
Hey, to
health.
me.
Yes,
Hello to me. I don't know if you're presenting, but we still see your first slides. I don't know if you're moving the slides already.
I have moved the slides. I'm now on slide 7. So I'm not sure what's
Okay,
happening.
could you?
right? Is it still stuck?
Yes, see on slides 1.
Hmm. Okay, let me just finish. Hopefully it will catch up at some point.
Okay.
Okay. But I hope I'm clear that even if you're not seeing the slides, you're able to follow.
Yes, well, we get you clearly.
Okay. All right. So I was talking about the importance of strengthening health facilities to respond to young people's bodily autonomy needs, as well as just making the health space youth friendly for young people. And at the core of the Ready Plus model is our initiative around training or building capacity of health providers to effectively work with young people to make the health space friendly and welcoming to young people. But something that is really innovative under Ready Plus is the inclusion of an advocacy tool. We call it the Ready to Care scorecard. And this scorecard basically enables young people to determine service delivery in health facilities. And the Ready to Care scorecard is implemented by young people using health facilities or accessing health in health facilities. They rate the services that they receive from the health providers, and this rating then informs quality improvement plans that the health facility puts together and uses to build capacity or to review how the health facility is operating and providing support to young people. And for us, it was important that the power of service delivery is not just about training and it's not just about talking about it, but it's also about enabling young people to really measure the impact of services that they get so that there's actual proof of how the impact of service delivery informs amongst many other things bodily autonomy of young people by way of ensuring that services meet the needs of young people and that the right selection and menu of commodities that young people require is also provided. And then I spoke about advocacy and accountability, which I think when anybody who doesn't belong to Ready thinks about Ready, this is what many people would know. Ready is really committed to movement building, and we recognize that conversations like bodily autonomy, rights, language, progressive laws and policy cannot be achieved by one entity. And so it's important for Ready that in the work that we do, we work with allies, we work with other movements and other partners and other young people to collectively create impact, to collectively advocate for changes, and to ensure that we build capacity of young people in meaningful and impactful ways so that they continue the legacy of advocacy around bodily autonomy, around health, and most importantly, something that is really close to the Ready program is the increasing conversation around decolonization of health structures, recognizing that for many young Africans, the health infrastructure remains very colonized, it's very top down, but also programming and activities supporting young people tend to not be funded, which in itself is another element around the very paternalistic ways of thinking about young people. And so Ready seeks to do this work by investing in young people in ways that enable them to create programs that speak to their desires, enables young people to come together and support each other. And most importantly, in making sure that as we talk about putting young people first and engaging them in meaningful ways, it is done through creative funding processes and supporting the work that they desire to see happening, and thus ensuring that as we strive towards the different SDGs, and particularly bodily autonomy for young people, it's done in sustainable ways. I think my time is up, and so I will stop here. And also because you're not seeing my presentation, I had a short video clip that I would have loved to play for you. But thank you so much for listening thus far.
Thank you very much to me. Maybe we could get the video at the end of the session after all the presentations if we do still have time. Thank you for that very insightful presentation and how you've brought us to see the importance of improving health services within the health sector and highlighting the power of service delivery, not only considering training and capacity building. We'll now welcome our second speaker, Clément, who has also extensive expertise and dedication within the field. Over to you, Clément. Amo, are you ready? Could you share Clément's presentation?
Hello, Fallon.
Yes, Clément.
Oh, you're okay. I was just testing my mic to see if it's clear and if you are hearing me loud and clear.
Perfect. We hear you clearly, Clément. I will just check with
All
Amo
right,
if
that's
he could.
fine. So I'm just waiting for the presentation to be shared. Okay, good morning, everyone. So I'll be presenting on behalf of Surface. My name is Clemia Magwenga, and I'm the Junior Program Officer. And my topic is very easy, precise, and then we are going to interact, and then also to have our young people on board to discuss some of the issues that are affecting them in relation to bodily autonomy. So my topic is addressing cultural and societal barriers to bodily autonomy, and also to share the best practices on community-based interventions for youth, as well as sexual reproductive health rights is concerned. So Amo, you can move to the next slide. I think that will be the third slide. Next slide, please. So in terms of understanding what is bodily autonomy, I also had to define the key terms of bodily autonomy, as well as looking or having a deep dive into cultural societal barriers. So the first definition of the key term to be defined is bodily autonomy, which is the individual's right to exercise control over their bodies, making decisions about their health, well-being, and physical integrity without any fear of coercion, that is force, violence, or discrimination. And then on cultural and societal barriers, this refers to the norms, values, beliefs, and practices that are deeply ingrained in a culture or society, which can limit or restrict individuals' ability to exercise their rights, including bodily autonomy. So as part and parcel of this conversation, I also wanted young people to share what's the importance of bodily autonomy. So you can write on the chat box to say what is it important for us to discuss about bodily autonomy in relation to sexual reproductive health, as well as comprehensive sexuality education and GBV as consent? Next slide, please. So I had also a slide to talk about the cultural and societal barriers. Where are they emanating from? What are these cultural and societal barriers? As well as having to look at the examples of these cultural and societal barriers. Like, for example, we have the cultural practices, attitudes that maintain gender equity, inequity, discrimination, and stigma. So these are cultural practices that are practiced within each and every society, and they vary from each country to other country in relation to bodily autonomy. We also have social expectations and constraints that limit individuals' choices and behavior. So if we are looking at social expectations, these are the things that are expected from men and boys in the society, and they vary from culture to culture, and they vary also from country to country. And also have the religious and customary beliefs that limit access to healthcare, education, and knowledge. So these are the religious practices that are also affecting what we call bodily autonomy in relation to each and individual, as well as the churches they are believing to. So some of the churches will say We are also okay with FGM, that is female genital mutilation. And this church will say, we don't take contraceptives, and this will say other things rather than this one. So it's not an homogeneous thing to talk about, but it varies also from culture to culture, country to country, especially in relation to African countries. And we also have language communication obstacles impede persons from accessing resources and services. We also have discriminatory laws, policies, behaviors that maintain about inequality and marginalization. So if we are talking of discriminatory laws, we are talking of access to LGBTI. Some of the countries, they don't allow to talk about LGBTIQ plus community since it's regarded as a taboo. We also have the social economic systems that promote poverty, inequality, and limited access to resources and opportunities. Next slide, please. So moving on to the examples of cultural and societal barriers, I've listed, these are not all of them, but according to the time that I was given, I had to maybe to have a deep dive in these 5 examples of cultural and societal barriers based on the previous slide that we were discussing about. So the first one is gender stereotypes and standards restricts women's ability to make decisions regarding their own bodies. So in Zimbabwe, let me tell you an example. In Zimbabwe, we actually have a religious, what we call Marange, or the apostolic sects. They would just say we don't allow women to take contraceptives, which is also restricting women's ability to make their informed decision regarding about their own bodies. And we also have stigma and prejudice against marginalized groups such as lesbians, gays, bisexual, transgender, queers, plus community. And we also have the traditional practices that promote female genital mutilation or child marriages. These are the most common things that are happening in our society. If you look at our traditional, there is also a lot of people, religious, political, traditional leaders that are facilitating promotion of female genital mutilation in other countries, and other countries are far more behind in terms of child marriages. They actually have the age of consent in their areas, but they don't even adhere to the policies or the age of consent that is there. So these are some of the cultural and societal barriers in our society, in our countries, that restrict us to bodily autonomy. And we also have language difficulties that impede people from receiving healthcare services. You know, we're advocating for youth-friendly services, accepting people with a disability, having that inclusion of all community, adolescent, young people, women, adolescent girls and young women, as well as to have that access for everyone, leaving no one and no place behind. We also have discriminatory legislation that criminalizes abortion or same-sex couples. Some of the countries, they have also gained a momentum in terms of reviewing their policies in relation to same-sex couples and also on abortion. But there are some countries which also have criminalization of these services. Like if a young person or a young woman wanted to do abortion, they have some restriction in terms of accessing that policy. So hence affecting bodily autonomy of an individual. Let's move to another slide, please. All right.
Hello, Clemio. Could we have your camera
maybe
on, please?
to
Just
have
for
a quick
while.
chat about this. Hello? Hello, Fallon? Are you hearing me?
Yes, Clemio, just a reminder that your camera is off. You can write on.
Oh, my camera is off.
Yes.
All right, that's fine. There's no option for accessing my camera. All right, so this is my final slide, which I'm going to talk about the best practices as well as the community-based interventions that we have been conducting as surveys. We have done a lot in terms of our best practices in relation to advancing sexual reproductive health, comprehensive sexuality education, sexual gender-based violence, and GBV, to mention a few. So these are snapshots of the things that we have done. So the first one is the training of 100 CSE, that is comprehensive sexuality champions, to engage their peers on sexual reproductive health, early and unintended pregnancies, comprehensive sexuality education issues in the 3 districts in Zimbabwe. Sorry, I'm just hello, Fallon. Sorry, there were
Yes,
some changes from the admin. All right, so I was talking about the basic practices and community-based interventions that we have done in Zimbabwe, as well as in other countries that we are currently doing our programming as surveys. So the first one, I was talking about the training of 100 CSE champions to engage their peers on sexual reproductive health and rights, early and unintended pregnancies, GBV, as well as comprehensive sexuality education under O3+ project. So these were done in remote areas such as Enyanka, Chipinge, and some of the rural districts in Zimbabwe. And we also have the digital health applications that include MobiSafids and same for SRHI champions on sexual reproductive health service provision. So this is an app which is used by young people to access services and also can be used as an advocate tool on the issues that are being raised by adolescent young people in relation to sexual reproductive health in different districts. There actually the mob surveys is being implemented. And we also have the training of trainers of ADA partners to conduct dialogues in communities, promote positive parenting and deny gender-based violence environment. So these were targeting CSOs, that is civil society organizations that we are also partnering with under ADA project to have that positive parenting, to have that TOT, so that they will be able to engage with the different communities, with different service providers in the community, hence advancing positive parenting, hence advancing gender-based violence, and conducive environment for adolescent young people to discuss about the issues that are affecting them, as well as raising an advocacy act in relation to what has been raised by young people through comprehensive sexuality education and SIHR service uptake. And we also have engagement with political, religious, and traditional leaders on LGBTIQ plus community, age of consent, as well as Termination of Pregnancy Act. So if you know, our Zimbabwe, we are currently using the TOP, which was developed in 1978. So now we are saying we just want to advance this. We need to review. We are in the 21st century. How can we use something which was developed 40 or 50 years ago? Let's have that environment which also have bodily autonomy in terms of advancing adolescent girls and young women bodily autonomy rights on their body. Then lastly, but not least, we have also regional police advocacy campaign led by surveys responding to high rates of unsafe abortion in the 16 countries of Southern Africa Development Community, that is SADC region. So these are some of the snapshots. With the time that I had to do a snapshot of the best practice as well as the community-based interventions that we are doing at Surface. So this marks the end of my presentation. Thank you so much, Fallon. And thank you so much, everyone, for listening.
Thank you very much, Clemio, for that very, very valuable and insightful presentation, and for taking us to Zimbabwe and showing us some of the job and the community work that SAF does in Zimbabwe. So thank you very much. We will now welcome our third speaker, who is Lucy, hailing from Kenya, and she's an O3 UNESCO ambassador. Over to you, Lucy.
Hi, I trust you can hear me properly. Can you hear me properly?
Yes, Lucy, we can.
Oh, okay, thank you. I don't have slides because my presentation is quite simple and direct to the point. So, my name is Lucy Wamboi. A final year student at the University of Nairobi. I'm also a sexual reproductive health and rights, gender equality, as well as gender-based violence activist. Today, I'm going to be talking about the crucial role of education and advocacy for bodily autonomy in our schools. So, to start with, I think it's quite important if we define what is bodily autonomy, because you have people who have joined the meeting and they cannot be able to understand or comprehend what is body autonomy. So basically, body autonomy is the right of individuals to make decisions about their own bodies without any influence. Um, making your own choices about your own body, like sexual reproductive health when you want to have babies, um, contraception, as well as even refusing unwanted medical treatment. Um, when it comes to educating students about bodily autonomy, it's quite important because it gives empowerment, like it empowers the students and young people. I'm speaking on behalf of the young people, obviously. And when we empower the young people, we help them make informed choices. And when young people can make informed choices on their sexual reproductive health and rights, we reduce STIs, HIV infection, we reduce teen pregnancies, and most importantly, we reduce gender-based violence because when we educate people, we tell them about consent and we're able to dig deep because I don't know whether you guys have seen the T video, which we normally use to teach consent because it normally explains what's consent and consent can be given and taken away anytime. And simply because someone has decided to consent now doesn't mean they have given you a lifetime consent. So when we teach about these things, we reduce the rate of violence in our schools and in our community at large. And also something that I wanted to mention is about the um, comprehensive sexual education. It's quite important. And now, because we're talking about advocacy and education in schools, sometimes, depending with the country, CSE faces a lot of rejection. And the best way we saw of introducing or injecting CSE is, combining it with our curriculum. Because, for example, here in Kenya, we call it life skills. So when we are teaching life skills, we also add all these things that CSE covers, but we still call it life skills. So this way, we would be able to pass this information to the young people and the students without necessarily facing a lot of rejection, maybe from the government, from the society, from the church, etc. Education on bodily autonomy helps us achieve gender equality because we are able to address power imbalances. We are able to advocate for women's rights, even people who come from the marginalized communities. They are able to get education, and through this, we also give economic empowerment to most of our women. And the last part is about the strategies for effective advocacy. As I mentioned, is a curriculum integration because, for example, here at the University of Nairobi, we do have like a packed course that is taken as a side course by students where we teach about gender-based violence, mental health, and sexual reproductive health. But also we have a core unit called HIV. So when we teach about HIV, like here in Kenya, we normally teach about HIV all the way from primary school, secondary school to university. But we still have very high, not so high, but very high HIV infection rate. So what are we doing wrong? What is the bridge between the information that we have and getting this information to the young people? So we need young people to talk to fellow young people because of relatability, and also because sometimes students think that they're just studying in school so that they can do exams, pass, and get into the careers that they want. Um, the other thing that we have done is that we train lecturers about all these things, because sometimes we might empower students, but if the lecturers don't understand these things, then it might end up not being so effective. We also train custodians, security guards, and for example, I'm going to give an example with the UNESCO O3 Plus project. What we have done at the University of Nairobi, we have an app called Radar app, and through this app called Radar app, it has all the information. Like, for example, if you want a counselor for mental health, for the gender-based violence, maybe you have been abused, you're going to find them there. You're going to chat with them anonymously, because we also have people who are not able to seek this information confidently because of the barriers that are there in our society. So that gives anonymity. So anyone has access to information. We also have a one-stop gender desk, whereby in case you go through violation, you can be able to report there and you get medical care, you get mental care, and even legal care in case it's needed. So that encourages more people to report, because sometimes people avoid reporting because you don't want to go report to a person and then they send you to the next person and you keep on repeating your story, and it's not a very nice story sometimes, because these things are associated with shame sometimes, because that's how the community is. We also have a wellness center in our school where you can just book an appointment online and choose the person who you want to attend to you, and they will give you an appointment when you can do it. We also hold webinars where we train these custodians, students, lecturers, everyone in the society, in the school community about everything. And when we empower everybody, it becomes very easy for everything to be navigated. We also have workshops, we have seminars, and we also use fun days like sporting activities. When we're having sports day, we talk about these things. When we are having like the Bodily nights, when we're looking for Mr. and Miss UN, we also integrate these things. And that is one way that we have been able to succeed in this. And we also have good reviewed policies that we review every year. Like every June, we have to review these policies and we talk about these policies over and over again. And as I finish, I want to call all of us to support and advocate for sexual reproductive health. And in our schools and in our communities at large, because by doing so, we are able to create equitable and just society where everyone has freedom to make choices about, their bodies. And if I have freedom, or if I'm at the liberty to make choices about my body, then that means we have a healthier and more empowered individuals and community at large. Thank you so much. And yeah, that's the end of my presentation.
Falon, you're muted.
I'm very sorry about that. No, I was just thanking you, Lucy, for sharing those crucial insights and within the school community and bringing the perspectives of young people, as well as highlighting the importance of CSC in reducing GBV in schools, as well as in schools and within our communities. Those contributions were very, very greatly appreciated. We will now move to the plenary and question and answers. Please, our viewers and our attendees, kindly drop in your questions. If you really have a boiling question that you want to speak up, we will unmute you and you can ask your questions to our panelists and we will direct it to them. please, this is the time for us to also share your perspectives of what goes on in your community. We have seen the strategies and also best practices within coming from different parts of Africa. If you have something that you want to share as well, this is the time to comment, share, and ask questions. I will just also go to the chat to see if we have some questions for our panelists already. Nalindi wants to speak. Nalindi, let me go and try and unmute you.
I
Yes,
think I've
Nalindi, I
just
think
been
you can
on.
speak.
Hello? Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can.
Thank you so much. This was such an enlightening conversation. My name is Naledi Mpanza. I'm working at the Center for Human Rights as a project officer on sexual and gender minorities. So that's LGBTQI plus persons and their human rights. And I'm also doing my PhD on pre-exposure prophylaxis, access, and youth participation in universities. So my question is very selfish because I realize there's so many themes. There's so many themes that relate with what I'm working on. And I think my big question has to do with, of course, we've got a lot of partners that provide these services for young people that are youth friendly. And of course, universities, even though their HIV statistics are not, vast, they don't represent the society's numbers and the stubborn undecreasing or like almost the stubborn statistics of young women and adolescent girls, their statistics almost not going down the same way that the general population and the incidence rate is. So my question has to do with in spaces where you can't really, in spaces like universities where the numbers isn't where it's at, but the provision of services is happening, how can we link that to human rights? How can we justify public resources being spent on universities? And that speaks to that privilege, right? And how do you justify universities being accountable to these public funds that they use? And then how do we, in fact, sort of create a culture that really forces universities to include the young people in decision making about how to market? I think one of the first speakers spoke about it's not only about access, but availability and visibility of the services so that young people are conscious of what is available to them. And they're able to also sort of interact with the media that sort of portrays or shares more information about these services like PrEP and PEP. And in some universities, you'll find that they also have ARVs. And what's the role also of referrals? Is referrals enough to say, universities don't have a duty of care when it comes to health provision, especially because most universities, at least in South Africa, have got a campus clinic on their ground. So I think my big question is, how do we hold universities accountable to the duty of care and sexual and reproductive health and rights? I think that's the big one. Thank you so much. I think it's to any of the speakers.
Thank you very much, Nandeli. Yes, this really speaks to all of our speakers. So please, anyone who really feels like to go first to answer Nandeli, please. Yes, to me.
I'll give it a stab. Thank you, Naledi, for I think both an insightful comment as well as the question. At Ready, we're not currently in institutions of higher learning because a great part of our target communities are young people that are out of school or come from very poor resource settings. So, tertiary education in itself is a luxury for many of them.
Yeah.
But just given the context of, what we know and what I can share, is that a lot of the times universities, I would say, are currently dealing with a polycrisis, right? On one hand, the biggest conversation we're hearing is just in South Africa, for example, debt cancellation. Many young people are still fighting bread and butter issues. And so you find that issues like holding universities or institutions accountable for right of care, for safety, which is another issue that many universities are faced with. Violence prevention being a third layer, you find that what makes it into mainstream conversational media becomes the issue around fees. For example, South Africa, we've known about fees must fall. But when it comes to service delivery in ways that you have described, I agree with you. That conversation is not where it's supposed to be. And institutions of higher learning, like primary education or basic education, indeed have a right to care, and they have they need to do that in ways that speak to the diversity within the student population. But also, I think another thing here for me would be the issue around a multisectoral approach. A lot of the learning points to, lack of resources, and it's not always clear how, for example, the departments across board work with each other to provide, some of these services. So if you're thinking about Department of Health, or Ministry of Health in other countries, and its association to tertiary education, and how the advocacy that needs to happen needs to get out of the streets, out of the boardrooms, and really for us to try and bridge what I'd like calling academia, that bridge between what's happening in the environment and in practice, as well as what's happening in the academic space. So, I feel like there are tools and there are case studies of how this work could be done. But I certainly believe that the willingness, and particularly the students represented, what do they call them, the SRCs, also have a role to play, that it should not just be about political alignment, but it should really be about foregrounding SRH and gender issues in ways that make it into manifestos, and thus being able to hold universities accountable. And I think sometimes we lose it there. It becomes so political that, the real issues around bodily autonomy, access, end up paling in comparison.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Nedeli, for that very, very insightful question. It really seems conversations, and we really see that we still have a lot of work to do within this space, especially within tertiary institutions community. There's another question in the chat for Lucy from Hastings. Lucy, thank you for your presentation. My question is on how to fight opposition on sensitive bodily autonomy and integrity SRHR issues, considering that CSC and LGBTQI is a sticky issue in Kenya and other African countries.
I think I would love to go back to what Natalie said for a few seconds before I go back to Saka. For us at the University of Nairobi, for example, I mentioned about the RADA app. This is an app that was developed by students. So this is one of the ways that we empower students, because they do develop the app and they do everything that is needed. And then we look for sponsors who come in and sponsor the app. So this means we are giving students an opportunity to explore, and we are also empowering them financially. When it comes to including the young people in these decisions, for us, we are normally included in these policy making tables. For example, when we are reviewing the policies, we always have representatives. The students' representatives are people who advocate for SRHR. And also, I think I may be speaking from a point of privilege, because we have received massive support since 2021. And that means our clinics are fully equipped, and we have a lot of resources, to say the least. Saka says about discrimination that is there in LGBTQ in Kenya and African countries. True, there's a lot of discrimination when it comes to LGBTQ in Kenya and most of these African countries. But for us, what we do is we don't necessarily go there advocating for LGBTQ, but if you have a problem, you won't be discriminated against how you express yourself sexually. So that's how it is. Like, if you have a problem and you want to access the clinic, you just go and they won't ask you how you identify sexually. So that's just how we deal with it. And another thing that one of the other barriers is the cultural barrier. And now this is a higher learning institution, and cultural barrier is there, but we try at a time. And as I said about the CSC, we integrate it with the already existing curriculum. Like for us, we study HIV as HIV and AIDS as a core course. So we just integrate CSC there, but we also have, it's currently at the University of Nairobi only, but we also have short courses that deal with sexual reproductive health and gender-based violence. I hope I have answered your question, Saka. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lucy. We also have Clemio who wants to add to that. Or yes, Clemio.
Uh, my apologies for I don't know how it was placed. So, but maybe to add on what Lucy said, education and
Clemio, I think we lost you there. Clemio?
sorry, I'm having challenges with my network here. So the saying, in maybe to add on what Lucy said or indicated about comprehensive sexuality education as well as LGBTIQ plus community is concerned, is that everyone in Africa, it's regarded as a taboo in other countries, but it's more of it's not a one size fits all that we can say in all Africa, there's no progress in terms of maybe inclusivity, in terms of accessing services for LGBTI as well, and educating people or young people about comprehensive sexuality. It's us who can advocate for it. Let's have that engagement with religious, political, traditional leaders, sensitizing them about LGBTIQ, and then also to talk about comprehensive sexuality education. In as much as we are facing challenges, we need to have that capacity. We need to have that advocacy. Us, we also finding some progress that have been happened in Namibia. So it's not a one-day event, but also it's a progressive. We just want to have that. We have to indicate it in all our discussions. We also need to engage with the policymakers. We also have to engage with the leaders in our society so that they will have a better understanding and appreciation of what do we mean when we are talking of the key and vulnerable population.
Thank you very much, Clemio, for that addition. I will check now the chat if we have more questions or comments.
Follow
Please, if you also want to
you?
speak up, yes, please. Um, who was that again? Clemio, was it you? Okay, please. Kindly just keep keep the questions coming in the chats, as well as if you want to speak up, notify us and we will unmute you and you ask your questions directly to the speakers or your contributions. I also see a lot of comments about sharing the presentations. Yes, this presentation, like I mentioned earlier, is being recorded, and yes, we will do share the slides of the speakers. Okay, Clemmy is just notifying me that he was trying to speak up, but he has some network challenges. Yes, please, we do welcome your contributions and comments, questions. Yes, to me.
I don't have a question, but I wanted to also share that the presentation that the participants will be getting from me includes a video of a Radio Academy. We recently held the Radio Academy focusing on engaging young people in the LGBTI response. And it was part of our contribution, I suppose, to answering the question that Hastings has asked in terms of how can young people organize in response to the pushback on the rights agenda. And if we're able to play it, we will. If not, we will try and make it available as well.
Yes, thank you very much to me. I've seen the presentations you shared already with me. Yes, I think we will include it and share because I'm not sure we can play it now. We are already running late with time. Yes, colleagues, do we have any other? Yes, to me, your hand is still up. Is that still for the same comment or another?
It was a legacy hand, Falone. It's I'll lower it now.
Okay, thank you. Hello, colleagues. Do we have more questions, more comments? I see another questions online on how do we bring parents on board? I think this goes to any of the speakers. How do we bring parents on board on this topic?
Okay, I can go and hopefully Femio and Lucy will come in as well. So from Ready, as I shared, we have a focus on caregivers and parents. This includes not only organizing sensitization meetings for them, but we actually developed a guide that puts together really easy to follow guidelines on how to engage parents and caregivers. It includes case studies and so forth. Obviously, for Ready Plus, the guide is not just focusing on issues of bodily autonomy, but also on issues of supporting treatment adherence for young people that are living with HIV. The resources is freely available on the Frontline AIDS website or under the Ready portal that we've also just recently launched. I'll also find it and hopefully I can put it in the chat so you can follow it through.
Thank you very much to me. Yes, maybe we could just have that link on the chat if you are available with it now. But if not, we kindly ask that you maybe go on the site and check out the link for more details on that. Yes, do we have any of our speakers who want to add to that?
All right. Hello, Fallon. I hope my internet is very, very unstable. But are you hearing me?
Yes, Clemio, we can hear you very clear now.
All right. Thank you so much. So I think engaging with parents and gatekeepers like political, religious, and traditional leaders, it's easy, but it depends with how you approach them. So as for SAFEDS, we have done a lot of community interventions with political, religious, and traditional leaders, having some dialogues in the community, discussing about issues affecting young people. Yes, some of it varies from culture to culture, and it varies from society to society. But it's how you engage with them that also opened a door for them to let you in or out. So it's the consistent as well as the interpersonal communication with them, so that they have a better appreciation of what is sexual reproductive health rights, what are comprehensive sexuality education. But sometimes you find out there's a myth which says if you are talking about comprehensive sexuality education, you're also promoting adolescent girls and adolescent boys and young men to indulge in sexual activities, which is a myth. So now it's how you conduct with them, it's how you put them on board to say, no, we are not actually discussing about sexual activities or anything to advance sexual activities. But young people, adolescent and young people, they're actually already sexually active. So we need to discuss with them so that they have informed decisions, bodily autonomy on what to do with their lives, on what they need to access in relation to sexual reproductive health and rights. So it's engaging with the community, having some dialogues, having some interpersonal communication with them, as well as maybe to have that social integration of services, to have teachers discussing about these issues in school, and also some community programs that we can engage with the parents in relation to the comprehensive sexuality education and sexual reproductive health.
Thank you very much, Clemio, for that addition. And also, I just want to notify our attendees that the link to me shared about how to better engage parents into this discussion has been shared in the chat. You could kindly just check that out. Yes, please. Do we have any other addition, Lucy?
Would you please repeat your question?
No, we are just talking still on the aspect of how to better bring parents on board.
Parents. Sorry, I missed that. Can you hear me? Or may have any network problems?
Lucy, can you hear us?
Yeah, now I can hear you. You can't hear me?
Lucy, we can hear you now.
Oh, okay. Um, I don't think it will be very easy to bring parents on board without targeting their influencers. And on this case, in the African context, the people who influence parents is the religion. So we just have to start with the religion and the community leaders. That's the best approach when it comes to bringing parents on board.
Thank you very much, Lucy, for that addition. I'll just check the comments, the chat box as well, if we have more questions. I see a hand up. Yes, please go for it, Tinashe.
Okay. My question is regarding. Let me just throw it over to the presenters. But my question is pertaining to how you guys are engaging young people, and I just want to understand pertaining to sexual reproductive health. How do you engage them in terms of their ages? Do you have any specific ages that you can say we start to engage when they are at this age, or you are just engaging all these school-going children? How is it like?
Thank you very much, Tinashe. I also think this question really goes to all of the speakers, and anybody who feels like to start first could kindly chip in.
All right, Falan, can I answer?
Yes, please go ahead.
All right, thank you, Tinashe, for that question. So now in Zimbabwe, I guess from our programming, it depends with the program that we also maybe implementing at that moment. Like, for example, we have implementing comprehensive sexuality education through the O3 Plus project, which was targeting 15 to 24 years, adolescent girls and young women, as well as young adolescent boys and young men. So now it depends with how you tackle with them. In as much as we do have the comprehensive sexuality education manual, it doesn't necessarily have that what can we say, that minimum age or that maximum age you can engage whenever you are implementing the project. But it's how the programmers are now engaging with the community to say this, we have to use age appropriate information whenever we are engaging with 15 to 24 years, or we are engaging with 14 years and below. Like, for example, let me give you an example. You can't educate 0 to maybe 5 to 14 years or 5 to 18 years about the condom use. It becomes a taboo, or it becomes irrelevant to their information. In as much as we say, from our perspective, it's necessary to educate them. But whenever you are engaging them, you need also the university level that is 18 plus to have that communication, to have that advanced communication in relation to on how you're going to utilize the condom. But whenever you are sharing an information in career guidance or whatever, age-appropriate information is very critical in programming, so that you have a better appreciation of their kind of question they will be asked, and also the information that you are disseminating to that age band. This is an area which need advocacy and which also need to relook on developing comprehensive sexuality guidelines as well as sexual reproductive health guidelines with age-appropriate information. As currently, I don't think we have that guidelines. Thank you for that. So it's for the programmers, it's also for the CSOs as well as the programmers to have that component being developed, and it's an issue that needs to be discussed further. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Clemio. We are not doing very good on time, but I will let Tinashe. Yes, Tinashe.
Yes, thank you, Clemia. I think that was a comprehensive answer. But what I also think, just from probably a naive perspective, as I'm not in the implementation at the moment, but what I think, if we check on trends in terms of how Africans we are implementing all these programs, which we call the so-called funded programs, we are letting the donors define conditions for us in terms of how we implement. Yet we are supposed to implement program coming from from a cultural perspective point of view, where we know our cultures and what is allowed and what is not allowed in our cultures. But the problem we are doing the reverse. We are letting these people, Western funders, define us, and this is how many programs are hitting. I can say they are hitting rocks, or they're hitting hard walls, because our culture is really at risk because of the money that we are getting from these people, and we are letting them define how we implement, which in many cases is a complete opposite in terms of our cultural expectation and our cultural practices, which now gives a very difficult approach point in terms of the communities and how communities intercept, how communities agree or work with these projects, because many of them, they are really crossing the lines in terms of our cultures. But yet, according to our funders, or according to, let's take for example those Western cultures which will be funding us, they will, those things will be really normal in terms of their own cultures, but these things will be, I think, probably a taboo in some instances, or will be really I mean, a disgrace to our culture. And that's where most of the projects are really finding it very difficult to get, communities on board, like, I mean, in communities on board, like having a full throttle intervention in communities. Because of that, I think that's where many of the organizations and many of the programs are lacking. But if we were coming from a perspective where we define things basing on our real African culture, basing on our real African values, you can see this project can really work and they can really bring change. But the opposite is really happening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tinashe, for that very insightful perspectives. Yes, to me.
Thank you. I don't think it would have been a rights conversation without the cultural element coming up. And I think there are a couple of things to consider when it comes to programming in communities in Africa. One is that we tend to think about culture as this very static concept, as if culture in itself has not moved with the times. And it has. And we're seeing how the change in or the shift in some of the cultural norms has actually enabled for programs to function. And coming from the HIV sector, had we stuck to a culture that was resistant to recognizing issues around prevention, for example, issues around multiple sexual partners and so forth, the HIV war would not have been impacted in ways that it has. And so that in 2024, when we think about culture, I think it's also important to recognize that in itself, culture is so dynamic and has actually, in many ways, impacted the ways in which we do the work in a very positive way. A couple of years, and I'm assuming Tinashe is from Zim, along with Surf AIDS, we worked on a project called Changing the River's Flow. And this project was actually, believe it or not, a program premised on SRHR, very, very strong on the rights agenda, and it was working with traditional leaders across Zimbabwe. And we were working with chiefs in Zimbabwe. And part of that training was to first unpack, the very definition of culture and what it means. And then to work with the chiefs to understand, firstly, their own understanding of the work that was underway. And secondly, to help us package the response in ways that the chiefs themselves could even articulate the work in communities. I still don't think we expected the impact of what we saw. And through the Changing the Rivers Flow project, we saw, incredible results. The chiefs themselves started taking up very progressive language. And progressive language here, I'm talking about encouraging delayed age of marriages, especially of the young girls through one of the faith sectors that people in Zimbabwe would understand very well. They started speaking up against, violence in the home and the link between violence in the home and HIV incidents, for example. They started talking about the need to change laws and policy to enable, for example, testing, access to services, and so forth. And what we were able to do was to even track how many of these chiefs, in their own language, as they were hosting community dialogues and so forth, started coming up with progressive language, not determined by the program, but out of their own doing. And I think for me, this remains a very critical way that shows that when we think Western agenda, let's not forget that culture in itself has enabled a lot of progress. And the reason why we're seeing so much impact in the SRHR field is also because of this dynamic movement that we've recognized. And again, a lot of these programs are now being managed by people from the same culture. So when you have people like me in the room, people like Lucy, like Clemio, I think to a certain extent, we are able to really think about what the localization agenda should look like. And I remember I spoke about this at the beginning around the decolonization of funding to enable us to come up with programs that speak to the dynamics on the ground and enable us to reach people and communities in languages and also leveraging the same culture, to enable us to reach our rights agenda. So I think it's just, another layer to add to this conversation to say, let's not see culture as static, and let's not see it as a divider, but let's really recognize the ways in which some of us are sitting here today healthier and in different ways, because culture has enabled us to change and to transform, and thus to actually enable us to reach the rights agenda or to contribute to the rights discourse in a meaningful way.
Thank you very much to me for that very interesting and insightful comment as well. We also have very interesting comments going on in the chat. We could also kindly check the chat box. We have Luke, who has commented on the positive parenting and saying that in Uganda they're engaging young people and parents through positive parenting dialogues, where issues of SRHR are discussed and parents commit to support young people in assessing SRHR. We also have Jude, who has commented about the cultural aspect of our discussion, who says our culture has moved with time and programming should be inspired by them. He has mentioned a lot of comments there. Very interesting. We also have Talk More, who has spoken about them implementing the same strategy of changing the river. They implemented the same changing the river's flow in Eswatini with SAF 8. That's very nice to hear. Jude also mentioned about programming should be inspired by our culture that has moved. Yes, thank you very much. Do we have any other comments? We are really running late on time. We are 6 more minutes above time. Any pressing comments that somebody wants to chip in? Any pressing question that you want our panelists to respond to? This is the time. We have few minutes. I will wait on that. Please look into the chat box. We have very interesting comments going on there. If no other questions, I would really like to thank everyone for their very insightful questions and active participation in this session today. It's been very enriching. I must say for myself, it has been a very enriching session, and thank you very much for your thoughtful contributions from our esteemed speakers and the engaging questions from our audience. So as we are closing today's panel discussion and the question and answer session, I would also like us to take a moment to reflect on the key takeaways that we've discussed here, and we should see how we've really emphasized during this session the critical need for comprehensive and inclusive approaches to advancing youth bodily autonomy. Our speakers have provided us with a wealth of knowledge on effective strategies, best practices. It has come from Zimbabwe, it has come from Kenya, it has come from South Africa. To me, has bring perspective from different African countries. Let's also try and take on this, use it in our work that we do back in our communities. We are encouraging you all to take these insights back to your organizations and communities as well, and to continue the conversation on how we can collectively advance SRHR for young people across Africa. We are very excited today to continue the journey with you. I just have two or maybe one 1 minute, please. I just have one reminder, which is talking about our next webinar. Like I mentioned during the introduction, this is a series building up towards our Men Engage SRHR Learning and Exchange Symposium. So please watch out on the 31st of this month, same time. We'll be talking about promoting female genital mutilation advocacy. So I'm inviting you to that as well. Block your calendar for that date. Without not further ado, I will say thank you once more again to our speakers, to our audience, and everyone who has helped this webinar to be a success. Let's keep working to make SRHR and the future for every young person to enjoy their bodily autonomy and realize their full potential. Have a great day, everyone, and see you in our next webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.